Coming up on Arirang News. Israel is expanding its ground operation, with tanks reportedly reaching the outskirts of Gaza City and cutting off key roads. This following its announcement that the second phase of the war has begun. President Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida have been recognized for their courage in mending ties, as the leaders jointly received a prize from the John F. Kennedy Foundation. They vowed to bolster their trilateral cooperation with the U.S. At the National Assembly, lawmakers mourn those lost from last Halloween's Itaewon crowd crush and reflect on what should be done to prevent such tragedy from reoccurring.
Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin in the Middle East, where Israeli troops are advancing deeper into Gaza. Heavy clashes have been reported on the outskirts of Gaza City, where the Israeli tanks are cutting off key roads. This follows Israel's announcement that it has entered the second phase of the war against Hamas. With the mounting death toll, Iran says Israel has crossed the red lines, while U.S. President Joe Biden urges Israel to prioritize the saving of civilian lives. Lee Soo-jin starts us off.
Israel is expanding its ground operations despite the escalating death toll in Gaza. According to Palestinian media on early Monday, Israeli troops bombarded the Strip with fierce air and artillery strikes. The airstrikes reportedly hit areas near Gaza City's hospitals, and Palestinian and Israeli militants also clashed in a border area east of Khan Yunis in the enclave south. This comes just hours after Israel released images of battle tanks on the west coast of the Gaza Strip, largely seen as a potential move to surround Gaza's main city. And Israeli tanks were also reported to have moved into the outskirts of Gaza City on Monday, cutting off one of the main roads connecting the northern part of the enclave to the south. The Israeli military said that it has struck 600 militant targets over the past few days, saying in a statement that IDF troops killed dozens of terrorists who barricade themselves in buildings and tunnels. The airstrikes are part of what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the second stage of its retaliatory assault against Hamas.
The war inside the Gaza Strip will be long and difficult, and we are ready for it.
With Israel continuing air raids on Gaza, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi renewed threats against the country on Sunday, saying that it had crossed the red line in Gaza, which may force everyone to take action, hinting at the possibility of Tehran getting involved in the conflict. Taking to social media, President Raisi said the U.S. told Iran not to do anything, but Washington continues to give widespread support to Israel. Meanwhile, calls for a humanitarian ceasefire continue to grow as the death toll mounts. According to the White House on Sunday, U.S. President Joe Biden told Netanyahu that Israel should conduct its operations in Gaza in a manner consistent with international humanitarian law that prioritizes the protection of civilians, in their first phone call since the Israeli military expanded its ground operations in Gaza on Friday. According to Gaza's health ministry, the death toll among Palestinians passed 8,000, mostly women and children, since armed conflict began on October 7th. While 1,400 have been killed on the Israeli side, most of them being civilians. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
In other news, President Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Kishida have been recognized by the John F. Kennedy Foundation for their courage in mending bilateral ties and strengthening three-way cooperation with the U.S. to promote regional peace. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
President Yoon and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida pledged more courageous efforts to pursue peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region after they jointly received a prize for their push to bolster trilateral cooperation with the United States. The John F. Kennedy Foundation held a ceremony Sunday, with the South Korean and Japanese leaders awarded as special recipients of the International Profile and Courage Award for working to improve bilateral ties despite domestic opposition arising from historical issues. In particular, the foundation said Yoon began working towards rapprochement with Japan shortly after his election in March last year, adding that the two leaders have since built up a strong personal relationship with an exchange of visits between Seoul and Tokyo. It said such courage to choose a more hopeful future led to a historic level of trilateral cooperation with the US at their Camp David summit. The August summit produced key documents that set out a new framework for dialogue and coordination on military responses to North Korea's provocations and broader regional security, as well as economic issues and humanitarian projects in the Indo-Pacific. Accepting the honor in a video message, the South Korean leader said he was privileged to be awarded with his dear friend Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, promising even greater efforts to show courage based on utter sacrifice and dedication.
I know that this award is a reminder of my solemn duty, a profound sense of responsibility placed upon the Republic of Korea, the United States, and Japan to promote freedom and prosperity around the world by standing together in solidarity.
Yoon said as an English learner in high school, he was inspired by President Kennedy's values and worldview, which drove his push for innovation and reform, which led to social progress and scientific achievement. He mentioned the former US leader's New Frontier speech in 1960, which outlined his bold vision for the future while describing the many challenges facing America. Also in a video message, Prime Minister Kishida said he would work to open a new era in Korean-Japan relations based on his friendship with and trust of President Yoon, and that with the US, the three Pacific powers would contribute to peace and stability in the region. Previous recipients of the Courage Award include Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last year, Presidents Barack Obama and George W. Bush, and former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. Oh Si-young, Arirang News.
President Yoon presided over a cabinet meeting earlier today and spoke about his recent trip to the Middle East, pension reform, and bills that need to be passed by the National Assembly. As our Kim Do-yeon reports, they all had one thing in common. They were linked to the livelihood of the people.
President Yoon Suk-yeol showed confidence on his trip to the Middle East last week that what's been accomplished will boost the domestic economy and improve the people's livelihoods. This, as on Monday he presided over a cabinet meeting and cited 63 MOUs and deals made in Saudi and Qatar worth around $20 billion.
이런 대규모 수출과 수주는 양질의 일자리 창출을 통해 경제와 민생에 활기를 불어넣을 것입니다.
He also referred to his trip to the UAE earlier this year, saying that his completed state visits to all three big Middle East economies and jobs have already been created from his trip to the Emirates, specifically on smart farms. Saying that South Korea inadvertently relies on exports, he promised to work harder to expand the horizons for the nation's companies and provide smaller firms opportunities to gain markets overseas.
정상 순방 외교는 우리 국민과 기업의 글로벌 시장 개척을 돕는 최적의 플랫폼입니다. 지금까지 저의 해외 순방에 동행한 경제사절단은 중소 중견기업이 80% 가까이 차지합니다.
He also emphasized the importance of keeping the domestic business atmosphere aligned with international standards for local companies to gain access to overseas markets, calling for relevant ministries to make sure of this. In the meantime, President Yoon also took time to address the government's efforts towards pension reform, as the government's new plan on pension system operation has passed the cabinet meeting and has been submitted to the National Assembly. Pension system is one of Yoon's three reform targets, along with labor and education. President Yoon explained that pension reform will not be just based on numbers and data. Instead, he will get a solid public consensus, vowing that he won't put political gains first.
저는 지난 대선 시에 제가 대통령이 되면 과거 정부들과 달리 연금 개혁에 대한 초당적 합의가 도출될 수 있도록 행정부가 과학적 근거와 국민 의견 조사, 선택 방안의 제시 등을 철저히 준비하고 적극 나서겠다고 약속드린 바 있습니다. 이 약속은 반드시 지킬 것입니다.
In the meantime, he also addressed yet-to-be-passed bills at the National Assembly that directly impact the livelihoods of the people. These include revisions to the Act on the Aggravated Punishment of Specific Economic Crimes, an effort to prevent 전세 fraud, as a rising number of young Koreans getting caught up in the rental deposit scam has spurred national anger. It's also notable that the request comes a day before Yoon's expected speech at the National Assembly on the government's budget for next year. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, a wider gap has been seen between South Korea's gross national income and that of the group of 7 countries due to the weakening won and a sluggish economy. Moon Hae-ryun explains.
The gap between South Korea's gross national income and that of G7 countries is growing bigger on the back of the weakening Korean won and slow economic growth. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Monday, the country's gross national income per capita by the World Bank's latest measurements for 2022 came to $35,990. GNI per capita is an important economic metric as it represents national income. Of the G7 countries, the top 7 economies in the world, Italy had the lowest GNI per capita at just under $37,000, but this is still over $1,700 more than South Korea. Back in 2020, South Korea's GNI per capita ranked above Italy's by $610, the first time in history that the country had recorded such a feat. However, this was temporary as Italy recorded a 9% decline in economic growth due to the effects of COVID-19. The following year, in 2021, Italy's GNI per capita rose by over $1,000. When compared to the United States, which ranks first among G7 countries in terms of GNI per capita, the gap widened with the US figure at around $40,000. The growing gap has been attributed to the weakening Korean won as well as differences in economic growth. According to the Bank of Korea's economic statistics system, the Korean won depreciated by around 13% in 2022 compared to 2021, when comparing the average $1 exchange rates throughout the year. While the euro, which is used in Italy, also fell against the greenback, the average euro-dollar exchange rate throughout 2022 was around 11% lower than the previous year, showing that the decline of its currency was weaker than that of the Korean won. As for economic growth, Italy's gross domestic product grew by 3.7% last year. This is more than 1 percentage point higher than South Korea's GDP for the same period, which was recorded at 2.6%. Whether South Korea can overtake Italy once again this year is dependent on GDP growth, as the exchange rate is said to be unlikely to recover within the next few months. The South Korean government has maintained its growth projection of 1.4% for the year, while Italy has reduced its outlook from 1% to 0.8%. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
In the U.S., a number of home appliances by LG Electronics have been named as the highest-ranking products this year. According to Consumer Reports, the LG OLED Evo ranked top among TVs for its high picture quality, including razor-sharp details. In fact, it has been praised as a TV with no flaws. 2 of LG's washing machines also stood as the best out of this year's cleaning and home appliances, while its induction cooker was selected as the most necessary cookware. Now, it's been over a year since South Korea launched its digital platform government, which aims for more user-friendly administrative services. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young spoke with the head of the Presidential Committee on the Digital Platform Government to explore what's been achieved and what still needs to be done.
Enabling people to receive services tailored to their needs by integrating information and data across the private and public sectors. This is what the Yoon administration has been focusing on through the Digital Platform Government Initiative, or DPG. First launched in September last year, a presidential committee on the digital platform government spent its first year creating an action plan.
The claiming process for actual medical expenses insurance will be simplified. Policyholders had to visit hospitals to obtain related documents and submit them to the insurance company. Similarly, for export companies, the process of applying for trade financing has been simplified by enabling electronic submission of documents from the Korea Customs Service to financial institutions.
These efforts have extended abroad. During President Yoon's state visit to the Middle East last week, South Korean tech giant Naver struck a deal with the Saudi Arabian government to create a digital twin platform, a virtual geospatial model of the real world for urban planning and management in 5 Saudi cities.
Establishing and disseminating a digital twin is part of the digital platform government's plan. The latest deal is the outcome of cooperation between the government and a private company. It is meaningful as it is the first export case of the digital platform government.
In terms of digital infrastructure, Ko says South Korea is a global powerhouse. But he thinks the country falls short in utilizing digital technology, which is the reason for creating the world's first use case of hyperscale AI across government departments.
We are creating a hyperscale AI for the government using refined data and reinforcement learning from human feedback, specifically from public officials. This can be used for data analysis and policymaking and addressing social welfare issues. It can be also used to prevent accidents like the Itaewon tragedy by analyzing traffic data to proactively identify potential risks in densely populated areas.
Last September, the South Korean government published what it calls the Digital Bill of Rights. Ko says that the DPG and the Digital Bill of Rights are inseparable.
The digital platform government plans to demonstrate the Digital Bill of Rights, focusing on improving people's welfare and rights. To alleviate concerns about misusing personal information, we'll establish a system that enables citizens to transparently verify how and where their data is shared and utilized within the government.
Under the theme of government innovation with the digital platform government, there will be an exhibition in November showcasing the achievements of the DPG and demonstrating how it'll shape the future of the government. 신하영, Arirang News.
Confirmed cases of lumpy skin disease in South Korea are still on the rise. As of 2 p.m. on Monday, the total number of farms in the country with cases hit 64. The first was confirmed 10 days ago. On Monday, farms in Chungcheongnam-do, Jeollabuk-do, and Gangwon-do provinces each had 1 confirmed case. Authorities are also currently conducting testing of 4 suspected cases. So far, the government has distributed vaccines for more than 2.4 million cattle, with over 2 million additional doses set to arrive tomorrow. Over at the National Assembly, lawmakers gathered this afternoon along with family members of the victims of the Itaewon crowd crush disaster to remember those who perished 1 year ago. Assembly Speaker Kim Jin-pyo said it was important to reflect on whether the country has fulfilled its duty to protect the lives and safety of the people. Ruling People Power Party floor leader Yoon Jae-ok noted that the National Assembly needed to refrain from political battles and come up with effective measures to prevent the repetition of any such disaster. Meanwhile, main opposition Democratic Party floor leader Hong Ik-pyo called for a united effort to pass a DP-led special bill aimed at reinvestigating the incident. The disaster claimed the lives of 159 people celebrating Halloween in Itaewon. South Korea is becoming more of a cultural powerhouse these days as K-pop and other K-content gain global fandom and popularity. And the nation's new culture minister, Yoon says he'll make Korean culture more accessible both at home and abroad. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin tells us what he has in mind.
It's been a busy 3 weeks for South Korea's new Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, Yoon. Since taking office earlier this month, he's been crisscrossing provinces, engaging with industry officials. This is his second term as culture minister, having previously served from 2008 to 2011. Back in the role, Yoo says he will make Korean culture more accessible both domestically and on the global stage. On the domestic front, he's prioritizing the transformation of regions outside Seoul into vibrant cultural hubs. This involves establishing more state-run performing arts companies and what's called the Local 100 project, which spotlights 100 landmarks, cultural assets, and artisans.
We aim to engage with people who are eager to participate in this project, enabling them to immerse themselves in the unique culture, cuisine, and products of each region. This initiative is expected to breathe new life into regions outside the capital.
Globally, Minister Yoo envisions enhancing the competitiveness of Korean content by providing support for content creators to safeguard their intellectual property rights, as well as allocating 1.7 trillion Korean won or $1.3 billion for content creation next year. When asked about his top priority, his answer was amending the Copyright Act.
The revision should take into account the interests of content creators, producers, streaming services, and other involved stakeholders. I'll constantly engage, discuss, and communicate with these parties.
Based on these, the Culture Ministry will lay out detailed policies for each sector by the end of this year. 송유진, Arirang News.
Researchers here are promising greater mobility for those in wheelchairs. They've made a wheelchair that can climb stairs. Yoon tells us how.
This electric wheelchair travels on the road, but once it reaches a step in front of a convenience store, it stops. Without assistance, access for this wheelchair is restricted. But local researchers have developed this strange-looking wheelchair that isn't stopped by stairs. It has smaller wheels that grip onto the surface of the stairs and move up and down them with stability.
It's the unique step-shaped wheel structure that helps the chair remain vertical relative to the ground. So a great advantage is its high stability against the risk of slipping.
Robotics technology has been incorporated into this new wheelchair, which also has a function that allows the user to change positions. It can maneuver to help the user to a standing position and can even move in that position, allowing further mobility. This helps tackle some of the health issues like poor blood circulation and the development of bed sores among wheelchair users.
Sitting in one position for a long period increases the risk of developing bed sores. So we need to stimulate blood circulation periodically, and this device provides that function.
The development of such new wheelchairs with the latest robotics technology means a new way for those with physical disabilities to have greater access to more general facilities. Yoon, Arirang News.
Mild autumn weather will persist for the time being. As for the daytime temperatures, warmer spells are expected, with highs surpassing the seasonal average. For Seoul, maximum temperatures will be peaking at 20 degrees Celsius. For eastern regions, conditions will be especially warm. Places like Gyeongju will see highs of 25 degrees, which is about 7 degrees higher than the seasonal norms. In the meantime, some mountainous regions have reached their peak of fall foliage, but there are some areas where fall foliage has just begun. Places like Gworaksan and Mudungsan have just started to change their colors. Fall foliage is forecast to last until next week. As for the readings, I'll be starting off at 13 degrees. Some inland regions will see lows falling into single figures. Daytime conditions will be much warmer. Seoul will get up to 20 degrees, Daejeon 21, Daegu and Busan will be reaching 23 degrees. On Wednesday, the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province will see a round of showers. Conditions will stay warmer than the seasonal average for the remainder of the week. It's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings an end to this Monday night newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news. Hope everyone has a good start of the week.